Hey everybody, welcome to the Coach Martin Show. I'm your host, Coach Martin. We got a special guest today. Actually, she's a fan favorite. Sarah, we're super pumped, excited to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, we already had you once, so there's a second time on the show. So, when we found out you were going to be on, we were, definitely looking forward to it. This show going to be a little bit different. Typically, we have a topic and we go off that. This is going to be basically questions with Sarah. So we got, obviously a lot of entrepreneurs out there watching, listening. We probably got some people who maybe you're not yet an entrepreneur. Maybe you're just, maybe you're working, you worked at your job for many, many years, but, you've always had that little like, hey, what would it be like? Or, maybe one day I could become it. Well, this is going to be the show for you. You're going to learn a lot. Sarah, we are super excited. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been okay. It's been a little bit of a rough couple weeks, but God is good. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
For sure. So I kind of want to jump in. I'm going to start with question number one. I got a couple questions, and I believe you got some as well.
Yes.
So Sarah, for you, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur?
So if I can go back just a little bit, I want to say I haven't always had that mindset. And we talk about it often. Just growing up, you're often taught to just get a good job and, go in the union and stay there and, retire and, and I see that with family members and it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, I know being a single mom, you're on a fixed income and I do not want to do that for the rest of my life. So just really start to think, I think it's just like, how can I hustle? What can I do? Having my main job, but what else can I do? I've done hair on the side. I've done, a bunch of different things. I feel like I wear many hats, but just, I think to me is, being an entrepreneur is really being able to set your own, tone for your life, like set your own schedule, it's definitely not easy. I would say, so for my first like legit business that I did by myself, it happened by mistake. It was during COVID era and I wanted to do something for my birthday and I love decorating and I love putting things together and just making them look pretty. So I was like inquiring and what it looked like back then. It was super popular where you set up these like lavish picnics and you have it like outside or the beach or whatever, backyard. And I was like, I can totally do that. Like I can do that with my own stuff. And so I did for my birthday and everybody was like, you should do this and like have people pay for it. And so it was cool. It was fun. I love doing it. And then found out that I can get paid to do that, and just really kind of went with it. One summer we were so busy, I hired a girl from church and she was helping me and we were both doing them. So it was fun because I not only like love doing all of that, but like hanging out the beach and getting paid for that. Like I'm there, like I'm totally doing this. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot during that. But I think that's when I was like, yeah, I have to find a way. I have to find be able to build a business and just like, have this be the way that I go, like moving forward for a future.
Yeah.
So
that was really good. When I really think about it, or when you think about it, Western culture has really, pushed the JOB agenda. And listen, if you're listening, you have a job, we don't want you to get offended. We just kind of want you to hear you out. But when you go back biblically, especially like you look at the New Testament, really, there was really only two types of employees. You were either a slave or you were a soldier, or one or the other. Everybody created something and they sold it, right, in the market. And I even think of there's a story, and I'm trying to think of exactly where it is. I think it's 1 Samuel. Don't hold me on it, but I believe it is. But there's a section where it said that, Israel, they weren't skilled at building weapons. The Philistines were. So they didn't have anyone that knew how to do that. And I remember I read that multiple times without like a light bulb going on. And then the last time I read it, I remember thinking to myself, man, if somebody would have learned how to fashion the weapons and do that, they would have made a killing. because nobody knew how to do that at that particular time. So yeah, I think it's become a popular thing to go the safe route. So
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is definitely foreign to a lot of people, and some people may say that it's not for everybody, but I believe it is. I believe that we have a God that is very creative, and I think since we were made in His image, we're all creative as well. So I think most people just don't know where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I agree too. I think, well, obviously, like I work with you guys, and there's nothing against like having a job, but if you can create, even what we do with helping these, these coaches and stuff, like you're already in that space. So if you're already doing something, but you can create something else that's yours under with what you already know, what you're already familiar with, and what you're already doing, like why wouldn't you want to do that, But yeah.
So what question you got for me?
So okay. So I have a few, but I'll start with, I feel like this ties into everything, like business, life, and also like the few last weeks, I feel like the Lord is just like echoing it, for me specifically, but just people talking about it with friends and hearing about it at church, and then life group and stuff like that. So we've also had this conversation before, and it's about, it's about people writing their own stories in their mind, whether that's business and like, I can't do this, or it's too hard, or it's already been a few years and we see nothing. And so you start writing those stories in your head, or it's a relationship, or it's a family, whatever it is. Like this, I was talking to a friend, my childhood friend, and I was telling her, she's in the journey of finding out who the Lord is. She's had a lot of church hurt, just a lot of things that her parents brought her into that really scarred her and her family, her siblings. But she truly has been hearing the Lord speak to her, which is great. But yeah, so we were talking about this relationship wise. She, was going through a lot and really treating her boyfriend poorly and realizing it. And she already had a story written in her head of what he was thinking and what he was feeling, and with not even asking, And so I think I think it's just a good question in general for business, life, your walk. So what do you, let me read it again. Why do you think us as humans start to write these stories?
Yeah, good question. I think, people have been conditioned and you don't even know it, right? So you've been conditioned since you were little to do things a certain way, to stay within the lines, to self-soothe when you're a baby, right? And we look for things like that when we get older, right? We draw always back into comfort. We don't like it when it's uncomfortable. We like things that are comfortable, and things that are comfortable are things that we actually know. So we stay with those things that we know. But the interesting thing is, think about where you are today as a human being. So it doesn't matter, what you're doing or who you are, or where you're located at. Basically, based off what you know, what you've done has gotten you to the point to where you're at. And I think if you were to take a poll with most people are not happy with where they're at. If you were to say, hey, this is the best it's going to be for the rest of your life, are you good with it? I think if most people were honest, they'd say no. Well, you only know what you know.
Right.
So, you have to get to a point where you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that whether it's in business or relationship, we have to get to the point where we first realize that we don't know it all. And what we do know has only got us to a specific point.
Yeah.
So if we want to get to a point we've never been, we got to do something we've never done. And I think they really can go hand in hand. I think they do in a lot of areas, but we have to get to a point. It always starts and ends with ourselves, right? So you have to get to a point where you are willing to, relinquish your right to be right, your right to think that you know it all, your right to whatever. And then, obviously God works situations and circumstances out for your favor, right? The Bible says all things work for the good. So a lot of times, I'll give you an example. So you could be in a relationship with somebody, let's say as an example, a wife. And a wife could be, well, I'm so frustrated when my husband does A, B, and C, right? Which probably happens a lot. But maybe God's allowing A, B, and C to take place so you would grow in an area you need to grow to be able to get to where you need to get to. And I think by just looking at this through a different set of lenses, it could really be a game changer. You know what I mean?
So rather than you're saying the wife pointing to the husband, acknowledging within herself, what could it be within me? Because ultimately we can't control other people, even if we are married to them. But acknowledging, that's kind of what I was telling her. You can only control yourself. Yeah. So what does that look like with you making adjustments or you acknowledging and really not getting offended? I think that's probably the hardest thing that I've more recently learned as healing is happening, through therapy for me and my kids. Listening to the hard things because their perspective is different than what yours is. And it's even sometimes we're like, were we even in the same place? Like that's what you saw. And so being open to hearing what their feedback is or what they felt and what, you know what I mean? And being open and not getting offended and hurt right away. Being in a place where, I know our pastors spoke about it, but being in a place where you have less of an opinion, maybe even no opinion, and you have no offense, where it's just like you're receiving it and being open and listening and being aware and trying to change maybe if there's areas that you need to change within yourself.
Yeah, I would say, and not even knowing any situation, and I do the same with guys that come to me for advice. The minute you fill in the blank, right, whether you're a guy or a girl, the minute you think that things would be better when the other party does so-and-so, you've already lost. You've already lost because that's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. So the only thing you need to focus on is what do you need to do to get better? What do you need to do to improve? What do you need to do to be a better husband or a better wife? And then when the other party does that as well, that's when you start having an amazing relationship. But the minute you start filling in the blank, well, things would be so much better when so-and-so would start doing A, B, and C. It would never happen because here's the deal. Even if they do A, B, and C, there'll be a D, E, and F. Yeah. And even when they do a D, you understand what I'm saying? That will never end. So that's never a template for success, ever. And, you're dealing with two imperfect people. So you're always going to have issues, always, right? But God can use those issues to grow you, not just him, but her, not just her, but him. Right. And that's the thing that I think a lot of us don't understand, that maybe that's why, going back to what I was saying before, maybe those things that your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend does that bothers you, maybe God's allowing that to happen to grow you. And if you don't grow, look at the children of Israel, right? For 40 years they spent in the desert. And then everybody from 20 years and older weren't even able to go in. They had to die in the desert, right? They'd never learned their lesson. And it's the same today. We see people that they don't learn their lesson. They're constantly going around the mountain over and over again. And the reason is because their perspective is off. The perspective has to change. If you're in a relationship, it 100% has to be, what do I need to do to get better today, right? And I need to create an environment that's a winning environment for my wife. And I need to champion my wife. Even the things that I may not like about her, it doesn't matter. God wired her that way for a reason. So I need to champion that, and vice versa. That's a template for success, not a if only they would fill in the blank. That will never work. Yeah. Because there'll always be a if only they. Does that make sense? Yeah. So
that's good. Do you want me to go with another one?
Give me another one.
Okay. What was a pivotal moment that strengthened your faith?
Yeah, it was interesting. I would say that, going through divorce number 2, you know what I mean? Now marriage number 2 is a lot better than marriage number 1. But again, here you are, having, just ended a second failed marriage, obviously. And I remember after that point, finally getting over it, I learned about internet dating, and it was fun and it was easy.
Wait, were you a believer?
I was a believer. Okay. I was a believer. I wasn't, I stepped away, and I wasn't, following the Lord like I should have 100%.
Okay.
But I remember that I was dating a girl, and the Lord said, he literally said to me, do you want to do this again your way, or do you want to do it my way? And I remember chewing on that for a bit, and I was like, you know what? Even looking at my last marriage, which I thought was a good marriage, it was just a good marriage. And I don't think God put us here to have a good anything. I think God put us here to live a life of abundance and purpose. Yeah. And that really changed how I did everything. So I grew up at that moment in time, and I tried to do everything with intention. So when I started dating now my wife, Carrie, I dated her with intention, and I did it the right way. You know what I mean? And I truly want to be a guy that lives a life of purpose in everything that I do. That way my children can see that, and my grandchildren can see that. Because I think ultimately that's what we're here for, right? We're not here for ourselves. So that was a game changer for me.
But what made you, because you were saying you were a believer and you were walking with the Lord, but not like you should have, probably not like how you are now. Correct. So what shifted that? Because that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, right? Like, he's going to tell you, go again until you get it. Good point.
I'm going to tell you, we'll take this all the way to Luke 19. So I've read the word many times. I do spend a lot of time in the word. My time in the word is a lot different now than it used to be. Mm-hmm. Before, it was just about kind of burning through it.
Yeah.
Now it's about getting deep and trying to learn each piece and what I need to really take out of it. Mm-hmm. But I remember, for me, if I was to go to a story in the Bible that really changed everything for me, it would be Luke 19. So when you look at Luke 19, we all know the story, right? We're talking about, the nobleman was going to go off to receive a kingdom. Before he did, he called 10 servants. He gave them all £1, and he told them, do business till I come. And he left, and anyways, when he came back, he called 3 of the servants, which is odd because there was 10. Now, in my opinion, the 7 of them probably squandered the pound that he gave them, but he called 3 to him, and basically he brought those 3 in one at a time. And the first one, he said, hey, what did you do with the pound I gave you? And the first servant turned from 1 to 10, and we know the response was, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Mm-hmm. Because you were faithful in little, you're now going to be over 10 cities. The second one, likewise, he turned 1 into 5. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. You're now going to be over 5 cities, right? And then the third one hid it and buried it. And then what the nobleman said was, you wicked and lazy servant. Mm-hmm. Now, when I go into that, I think that person was a Christian because they were a servant. So you could still be a Christian and you could still be wicked and lazy. And I think, unfortunately for me, that was the biggest eye-opener, because I don't want to be called you wicked and lazy servant when I meet the Lord for the very first time,
right,
face to face. So I really thought about that, and it was interesting because the reward that they got was to have impact and influence over those cities. So it's interesting. The same thing God's called us to do here on earth, our reward is the exact same thing. So it's not like we get a rest from our work. The reward is more of the work. So that's how important it is. And I'm going to tell you, that's probably the story that changed really everything for me when I really think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to model that with everything that we do. Are you multiplying what he gave you? And that's goes in business. Mm-hmm. That goes in your relationship, right? In my marriage, with my children, with my friendships, all the way across. Are you multiplying what he gave you?
Yeah.
So
what would you say to somebody that maybe, I feel like you have to be in a certain place with the Lord to really understand that, like to pick it apart in a way where you're wondering, why did he call only 3? Why did he reward the way that he did? Why, I like, for me personally, I wouldn't have thought of that story. I honestly don't know what story I would think about. I just think, like, I'm tired of jumping on that wheel again and having him say, go again, and he's a good father, and he's going to do that because he's going to teach us. And I think, sometimes it could be, okay, Lord, what do you want to show me in this? Because I want to learn and I don't want to have to do this again. But what would you say that to a believer that maybe just doesn't get that piece quite yet?
Yeah, so good point. I would actually say two things on that one. So one, the Bible says in all things, get wisdom, right? And then in all things get understanding. So you want to be wise regarding what you're going through. Mm-hmm. You do. So like God's given us a template to win. He already has. I believe he's already given us all the tools and everything we need, the tools, the resources, everything we need to win.
Yeah.
That's why the Lord said, I come to give you life and that abundantly. So I would say two things. One, you're going to want to get wisdom. So whatever area we're talking about, you want to skill up. If we're talking about a relationship, skill up in your relationship, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm trying to have a great relationship, I need to be a great husband. So who can I read? Who can I follow? Who can I get mentored by that is an amazing husband? That's going to expand my wisdom. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I would do is I would definitely make sure that I'm very particular with my counsel.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially in relationships, we get counsel from friends and look at how their life is. Mm-hmm. No disrespect to friends, but you're going to want to have wise counsel. So make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are great at what you're trying to accomplish and get counsel from them. Because here's what happens. A lot of times when you're in it, you can't see the shadows, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have somebody that's outside of it that has the wisdom, they can take a look at what you're doing or what you've done or what you haven't done, and they can see it a lot more clearly and give you clear instructions on how to get from A to B. So you're not going around and around and around and around.
Yeah.
Those would be my two pieces of advice for somebody that was, hey, I need help in. And it doesn't matter what the area is.
Right.
So I'm not talking about if it's business. I'm talking about if it's your, relationships with your children, if it's your relationships with your spouse. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Find somebody who is very, very good at that and glean from them and learn from them. Get wisdom.
Would that be part of the principles that we have talked about? I know our pastor too had recently mentioned those principles again across the board with business. I know we've talked about that, like millionaires, billionaires that are not believers, but using the same principles that God gave us, that they have worked for them.
Yeah.
And what do you say? You said that God's not
not a respecter of persons.
Yeah.
So yeah, and some people don't understand that. When you look at when God created the world, right? Mm-hmm. He set up rules for the world. It's like, think about if you created a game. Let's say the game is football. So you create this game of football, and then you insert rules to allow the game to go smoothly and continue on for a long time, right? So standards are the same way. So God puts these principles in place that work. They're the framework. So it doesn't matter if you're a believer that's using the framework or if you're a non-believer that's using the framework. The framework is what works.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times Christians could be like, well, man, how is it that guy makes $100 million a year when he doesn't even follow the Lord? Mm-hmm. Because he's actually following the Lord in that sense more than you are, because he's following the principles that the Lord laid down. You're not doing that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the result is going to be the same. Now, we can go deep into, like, sometimes the Lord stores up treasure, for the believer, and that all works. But the principles are what allowed somebody to be able to get what they're trying to get. And I remember my wife asked me the same thing. The last person I worked underneath, and he was a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
We made $50 million. And my wife said, how can he make $50 million in 1 year? How can he make $50 million when he's not a believer? And I said, God is not a respecter of persons. Mm-hmm. The principles that he's using, even though he doesn't know the Lord, are directly from the Lord. Did you know, Sarah, that you could go to any bookstore, you could buy any book on income that's worth its weight in gold, right? Mm-hmm. And every one of those principles are taken from the Word. They're all from the Bible, all of them. Even if the person that wrote it isn't a believer. Now, most of them are. Most of them are. But if they're not, the principles are right from the Word. You understand? So the principles work. And when you see people that are struggling in areas, the reason you're struggling is because you're not using the principle. I call it his success principles. You're not using a principle that you need to use to be able to win in that area.
Yeah. How are they getting these principles, though, if they're not reading the word and they're not believers?
It's a good question. So think about being so determined on whatever you want to do. Fill in the blank, right? Mm-hmm. And you're super determined, right? So let's talk about business. So you're super determined and you're just like the guy that's never going to quit or the girl that's never going to quit. And you end up going through trial and error, mm-hmm. but you're so determined that you don't allow anything to get in your way and you figure it out. So then you write down all the stuff that actually worked. Well, all the stuff that actually worked, you're going to be able to find those pieces in the word. So that's how they were able to literally do it. Okay. The same principles that God wrote out in the Bible are the same principles that they used to become uber successful.
Okay.
So.
Should I hit you with another one?
So hit me with another one, and then I'll hit you with one.
Okay. Let's see. So I guess this could be for both business and life. How would you tell someone who is enduring a stormy season that seems basically, how would you tell somebody that's going through a storm right now that whether it's business, like we were saying before, that doesn't seem like there's a light at the other side, and maybe even wanting to quit, or with a relationship?
Yeah. So it's usually the same answer, but it could be a different answer. So if you're in a relationship where like you have no business being in that relationship, that's different. And I'm talking about dating. So if you're dating somebody and there's major flags and, you have all this stuff, you probably have no business dating that person. That's different. If you're married and in a marriage relationship, that's a whole different conversation. But what I tell people, especially in business, what I tell them is, you have to look at the long picture. A lot of times we quit because we want it right away.
Yeah.
Right. Excuse me. So we want it right away. And when we don't get it uber quick, we quit. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't work that way. So it has to prepare you, right, to be able to handle what it is that you're supposed to walk into. Because if you walk into the promised land, but you're not prepared for the promised land, it's going to overwhelm you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you look at work, I always tell people all works, all of it. It either works for you or on you. And as humans, we want to see it working for us, but the part where it works on us is actually more valuable. Well, coach, how can that be?
Yeah.
Right? Here's where I make money. Here's the deal. Because when it works on you, somebody can take away all of this, but you now have the skill and capacity to earn it back. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So the process, God's a process God. So the process of you going through the stuff that you need to do strengthens you, expands your capacity, and allows you to be able to be that guy or girl that can actually do the thing that you need to do. Now, let's go all the way back to the story I told you in Luke 19. You had two willing parties. One 10 times the pound, one 5 times the pound. Well, how can that be? They were both willing parties. My answer is the one that turned 1 into 10, he had more capacity than the one that turned from 1 into 5, right? That's my point. So you're talking about, work and skill and things you had to go through to develop that. And that's how we have to look at everything that we do. It's okay. Yes, trust me, I get it, to get frustrated and things don't work out the way you want, but that's where we have to trust God, trust that he's a good father. He knows best. All things are going to work for the good. Even if you're going down a path that maybe you shouldn't, he'll close the door or reroute you, right? We have to move our feet and trust him. I think as believers, we're called to do two things: trust him and move our feet. Now, if you're not moving your feet, are you really trusting him?
Right.
Probably not. But I believe you trust him and you move your feet. So that's what I would say on that.
So real quick, what's another story that you can think of in the Bible that relates to that same like same outlook, like with the story with the servants. But what's another one? I remember, I feel like you've shared one before that's very similar.
About somebody not giving up?
Yeah. About God not just handing us things. Like we have to work, like every
I get it.
good thing,
Yeah.
you have to work for it. It just doesn't come super easy.
So
It's
God's
not
a
handing
process God. So let's go, I'll take you all the way back to the Genesis at the very beginning. So God created the Garden of Eden. There's no economy whatsoever, right? He put Adam and Eve in the garden and told them they could have anything they want. Everything was there for them except for one thing. But what a lot of times people miss is God put gold. So God created the gold, and he said, not only did he create it, he said it's good. So God took gold and stuck it in the ground in the garden where there was no economy. And he also not only put gold, but he also put jewels. I think there's 2 types of precious jewels he put in the ground. Now, God could have just put it on top of the ground, but he put it in the ground, right? So think about that for a minute. Why did he put it in the ground? There's a purpose to it, right? Because all work works, right? It's good. So he wants us to work for it. Like we have to dig for the gold,
right?
Literally and figuratively, right? We have to dig for the gold. You got to dig for it. Anytime you want gold in your relationship, in your business, in your whatever, you have to dig for the gold. Because I think what it does is it separates the people that are willing to do what they need to do to be able to have what they want compared to the rest of the people that just want to get by. They just want to kind of skate by and coast compared to the people that are willing to do what they need to do to have what it is they want to have. Does that make sense? So that's a story that I think I always remember, that God put the gold in the ground and he put it in the ground for a reason.
Yeah.
So
true. I remember watching these videos probably on Instagram or something, and this kid is interviewing, he's at like lavish places that only rich people would be at, and he's interviewing them, and he catches them real quick, usually while they're getting in or out of their car, and he's asking each of them what's one piece of advice from your success, like one thing that you would tell somebody that either has a business or wants that's building a business. And pretty much every single one is never give up. Like, don't quit. Like when it gets hard, when it looks like things are like it's not going to happen, or but it was pretty much the same answer. Just don't quit.
Yeah, no matter what. I mean, well, Coach, what if it takes 10 years? Well, the 10 years is going to pass already anyways.
Yeah.
So, like, don't give up.
Right.
Because you're going to go through 10 years anyways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, well, what if it takes longer? Then it takes longer. But if you believe that God put it in your heart and you want it bad enough, you won't give up. If you don't want it bad enough, time is a great exposer, Sarah. It'll always expose. So if you're not willing to do what it takes, then time's going to expose it.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, especially in the time that we live in, it's popular to just, blame other things for the reason we don't get what we want in life.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is you just weren't willing to do the work.
Yeah.
So.
Very true.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this last question.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up. So you think of the story of the Tower of Babel, right? The Babylonians, they wanted to build this tower, and it was going to go all the way up to the heavens. And they were building it, and it was like, and literally when you read the word, they were literally going to it was going to get accomplished.
Yeah.
Right. And then, the stories, the Lord comes down and, obviously, changed their language and scattered them. But it's interesting because when I think of the story, I think of motives matter. They matter. And in this case, if they were to have the right motive, it probably would have been accomplished. But because their motive was wrong, God intervened. And that's very interesting. And I think that, motives matter. So let me ask you a question. So what is your motive obviously in business, but in all that you do, what's your motive?
To please the Lord, to do what he's calling me to do and try my best to be obedient in that. Because I've experienced his goodness and his blessing in the little pieces of obedience. So I just cling to that and know, like, wow, if I just did this, like even more so, We all have a calling on our life. We all have a purpose here. And I was also talking to my friend about that. Like the closer you draw to him, the closer you speak to him and you read his word and you're in constant fellowship with him and constant relationship with him, he reveals things to you. And even going through stuff of like, okay, Lord, I've been single for a long time. Like, why? Like, why? I feel like I've been healing. I feel like I'm a whole different person. And I truly feel in this season that he just is calling. He has stuff that he needs me to do. And I know how I am too. If I were in a relationship, it would be a distraction. And so when he planted this, this nonprofit in my heart, like I want to put my all in it. And even, now being a part of, my church a little bit more and helping them and doing things like these are the things that I want to do. And so, yeah, my motive is him and being obedient because the blessing isn't just for me. Like I see now that it's bigger than me. And not just for him, but like for my kids and then their kids, and so I think when you really grasp what that means, it changes how you think.
Yeah, that's super good. Yeah. I mean, really it can, they could your motives could either be a, stumbling block or a cornerstone. And it's just interesting. You know what I mean? So it's just a good take. It's a good way to really think about it and be like, in everything you do, what's the motive behind it?
Well, he knows your heart too.
Yeah. Like
you can't hide that. He knows what you're thinking and where your heart posture is when you do things. So, being aware of that and knowing that. Yeah.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure having you on again.
That was fast.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So listen, everyone, we're super excited that you visited, you watched. Be sure to visit us at CoachMartinShow.com. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to share with your friends. I promise you got people in your circle that need to hear what Sarah and I said today. So until next time, I'm Coach Martin. This is Sarah. We are out.